Welcome into Bucs Insider, coming to you from the Bucs studio, presented by Ticketmaster. Casey Phillips here with Scott Smith and Bri Dix, and we have plenty to get to today, just when you think it is the dead time of year.
There is no dead time.
No such thing. And so we've got signings we talked about a little bit last week we're going to dive more into. We got a new one. We've got the owners' meetings coming up with potential rule changes, so plenty to dive into. Let's start with the signing we had not gotten to address yet from last week, and that is Sua Opeta is re-signed and returned. Bucs fans may be like, wait, who? Because unfortunately for him, he didn't get a chance to play last year because he came off that ACL. But I do feel like this is a great signing for the potential of the depth of the offensive line.
Yeah, Jason Light just keeps bringing him back. Jason Light and company. This is a lot like the re-signing of Bryce Hall. He got hurt in the first game, had played about 11 snaps, but the Bucs re-signed him because both these guys obviously have recovered or are close to finishing recovery from their injuries. And if they liked him a year ago, they like him still. Sua Opeta, what he brings is valuable experience to the interior line depth, because if you look at it, I know they like Elijah Klein a lot. Last year, 6th-round draft pick, but he didn't really get to play because virtually nobody got hurt, which is great, knock on wood. But everybody, Klein and everybody else that the Bucs have on their current depth chart behind the really good 3 starters has virtually no experience. So it's nice to have that veteran there. He stepped in for 6 games with the Eagles in 2003, and that's a really good offensive line. Stepped in for some good players when they were hurt and kept everything strong. So I think he's a perfect addition to this line, even though it's very strong up front, it does need some depth.
Well, considering the significant injury to Opeta, but also Bryce Hall, I think that just goes to show as a testament to what they saw during that small sample size that they did get to see them, that they were able to bring them back.
Yep, and I think that it's been a theme we've talked about a bit this offseason, is that last year when a backup was called upon, they were very green. Yeah. They had not played a lot either for us or anybody.
Especially on defense.
Especially on defense, but it was a common theme, and now we've seen that by re-signing guys like Sua Opeta and even Anthony Walker that we'll talk about as well, that now if, again, knocking on the wood, we never want injuries, but if they do happen, you're not feeling necessarily like you're having to call upon someone who doesn't have as much experience. My one little fun fact I have about Sua Opeta, I love to have a fun fact. He had the highest number of bench reps his year at the combine of any position of any player.
What was it?
39, and he beat the next best guy by 5 reps. So it wasn't even just like one more. He crushed the field his year.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
So obviously great strength.
Great strength. We got that going for us, which from interior linemen in particular, big deal. So, all right, so let's move on to a couple of these guys that we did mention last week that they had re-signed, but now, of course, they've had their press conferences. We've gotten to hear a little bit more from them. So let's start with wide receiver Sterling Shepard. This is a guy who had seemed like he played a lot in the league, been very successful, ended up on the practice squad a little bit, but then got called upon to do some pretty major things. So tell us a little bit about why you think they wanted to bring him back and the value he has brought to this offense.
Well, like you said, originally when they signed him last year on the 1-year deal, started on the practice squad, and then they activated him in week 5. He played a significant role following the injury to Chris Godwin, kind of emerged as that number 3 guy. And I think you saw just kind of his impact on 3rd downs over the middle of the field, but also he has that familiarity with Baker Mayfield going back to their days at Oklahoma. And I think you're just going to get to see that chemistry that they have kind of continue to grow. And I loved in his presser, he talked a lot about the way that Mike Evans, the way that Chris Godwin, the way that Tristan Wirfs, they all attack the game of football, has kind of reignited his love for the game and motivates him and makes him want to go that much more hard.
Yeah, think about it. I mean, he admitted he was kind of on the road to retirement last offseason after that time with the Giants. And I think it was largely because after a real nice start to his career, he really lost a lot of time for about 3 or 4 straight years with injuries. And so you can understand why a player who's been struggling to get through a season might decide, okay, this is the time to hang him up. I've had a good career. But he comes here. He did have some injury issues before the season started, and like you said, began the season on practice squad. But he pretty quickly grew into an important role. Yeah. And by the end of the season, he was healthy, and he didn't have he didn't play 17 games because he started on the practice squad, but he didn't miss any time due to injuries, and I think that kind of reinvigorated him. like, I've still got football left in me. He said it was like the most football he's played in a long time.
Yeah, well, let's take a listen to his press conference where he addressed what we just talked about.
I knew that I had a lot to give in the tank. After leaving New York, it was just kind of the situation and not really being in the position to play as much, and then wanting to go with the younger guys, which is understandable. But I knew I had a lot more to give. And as soon as I got my opportunity, I tried to make the most of it. And, I feel like I have a little bit of ball left to play, and I just want to max it out all the way. I feel like I can clean up some of the stuff that I even did last year. It was more ball than I got to play in a long time last year. So I feel like getting that underneath me is going to help me out.
Yeah, very excited to have a guy like Sterling back. And again, we've talked about how much they've loved to bring back these guys. They already know who they are, what they bring, that consistency, especially on offense. Everyone is back essentially, which is great. But one of the few new additions we've had from free agency is Anthony Walker, the linebacker. So, Scott, tell me a little bit about what stands out to you now about him, and especially now that we've gotten to hear from him in the press conference.
Well, I think I covered already last week the most important note about Anthony Walker, right?
Yes.
Northwestern
University. Of course, most important by far.
What I liked in his press conference was, and I would think maybe an issue we've had in the middle of the field, we've had some issues in the middle of the field with coverage last year or two. Obviously, Lavonte's always been good in that in his career, but he's just one man. I think Anthony Walker has shown throughout his career that he's a good coverage linebacker, and especially when you're playing in Tampa too, you guys know this. The middle linebacker has a lot of responsibility.
A lot of field to cover.
Yeah. And see, he was funny because he kind of laughed. I guess these players do sometimes pay attention to like PFF grades and stuff like that. He's like, that stuff's out there. When you watch the film, I do not get beat down the middle behind me, and I do not get beat down the middle in front of me. So I can't.
What else can you ask for?
I can't claim that I then ran and watched the film. So
we'll just take his word for it.
Take him at his word, but that's something that would be a very nice addition to the Bucs defense.
And you brought up Lavonte David, and we found out that this is another key component.
So both Lavonte David and Anthony Walker, they're both from Miami. They've trained together in the offseason. And he said in his presser that they've lobbied to be on the same team since Anthony Walker was drafted. Now the dream comes true. And I just think I loved his quote on Lavonte David, just talking about the impact that he's had, the way that he's touched so many lives in the city of Tampa, and that essentially for him there was no better player that he would rather play alongside. So I'm excited to see the way that Todd Bowles uses Anthony Walker, but also Servassier Dennis, and kind of how that ends up looking in the middle of the
I think it's going to be really interesting to watch. That's definitely one of the position groups that has the potential to have the most change, but then thank goodness Lavonte is still back, so there is some of that veteran consistency as well.
Might add a draft pick there.
But might add a draft pick there. That's going to be a really interesting group to watch. All right, so we have a trivia question. I did end up getting a Stump Scott, but we got it too last minute to add, so stay tuned for that in coming weeks. Okay. I just didn't notice it in time.
Darn.
That dang hidden messages part of the Instagram app got me. But I did find it, so person who sent it to me, I appreciated it. We will use it. For now, we're going to do our regular trivia question. So, Bri, what do we got here?
Alrighty. When the Buccaneers drafted punter Jake Camarda in 2022, he was fresh off winning a national championship with Georgia. Prior to that, who was the last player from a reigning Division I champion drafted by the Buccaneers?
Any idea?
No.
Okay.
I was hopeful. As she started reading the question, I was hopeful the question was just going to be, where did Jake win the championship? And I was going to be like, Georgia! And then, no. All right, so we're going to cover another little topic, and then we'll give you the answer at the end. For everyone playing along at home, we'll give you a few minutes to think about it. I wish I didn't have to keep talking so I could think harder about it and have a chance.
I'll do a lot of talking.
Okay, great, and then I'll think. Okay, so we have the owners' meetings coming up next week, which, is always a great chance to hear from owners, general managers, coaches, people like that. But it's also one of the big things is the rule changes that get proposed. Some get passed, some do not. And it's always funny. Some years, nothing happens. Some years, a lot happens. And of course, last year was one of those times that there was a fairly large rule change, that especially that kickoff stuff. So tell me, Scott, a little bit about what are the things that are proposed, how we feel about it, how likely some of these things are to pass.
Well, we'll start with what you were just talking about. That the new kickoff format with the players 5 yards apart and the landing zone and all that. That a lot of times when you have a big major rule change like that, think back when we did the, you could review pass interference, you could challenge pass interference or non-pass interference calls. They do that on a 1-year basis, and if they like how it went, then they vote to do it, make it permanent. Now that nobody liked that pass interference one, so they scrapped that one, but they're happy with how the kickoff format worked in terms of it's a safer play now. It was the most dangerous play in the game. Highest number of injuries, and they're happy that they've managed to make it a less dangerous play, so they want to keep the format, but they weren't really necessarily happy with the amount of returns. It went up from about 21% of kickoffs getting returned before the new rule to about 32%. So like, how can we make, now that this is a safe play, we want to get more returns in the game. How do we do that? Well, they're proposing making the touchback on the kickoff, not the 30, but now the 35.
Even more penalty for doing one.
Yeah.
Like, we want you to not do this.
We don't want touchbacks. So the reason being, so the touchback was at the 30, and the average drive start on when they did return the ball was around the 29. So most teams were like, let's just give them one more yard and not risk giving up the big one, right? I don't know about you guys. You can tell me how you feel. I don't like it.
Tell me why.
At some point, we're making this too easy for offense. Think about the Dallas game last December. Bucs kicked off to start the game. The defense held Dallas to 30 yards, and they kicked a field goal.
Yep.
Because they have one of these great big leg kickers.
Yeah.
We were already talking about how the calculus of the game has changed with the new touchback rule and how far these kickers can reliably make field goals from, that you don't even have to have a good drive anymore to score a field goal. So now think about starting at 5 yards even closer. You could get like one 18-yard pass, and all of a sudden you're kicking a 50-yard
Which
field goal.
We will love if we are the team doing that to win the game at the end. I mean, so that's what's funny, is it depends on, like, you're right, it definitely is favoring the offense, but then in a league that they've clearly decided that that's their priorities, trying to create more offense, a lot of the rule changes have been about that, and it does make it potentially more exciting and fun to have these chances where you'd normally say, at the end of the game at least. The rest of the game, I kind of agree with you on, like, all right, let's make them work a little bit here to at least get 3. But how cool at the end of the game that there might be more chances to have that game-tying or game-winning field goal when you might otherwise not. I'm trying to be the optimist, Scott. Let me be the optimist.
I agree with Scott on that.
How much do you like watching
make it
field
a little
goals?
bit challenging.
Do you love watching field goals? Do you want a lot more field goals?
No, but I want them if we're down by 3 with like 20 seconds
So
left.
if the rule only applies to the Buccaneers, we're happy with it.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
There we go. Now we've settled that.
Then another one is Philly, I think, put this one in. They want to make the regular season overtime rules the same as postseason, which now you know each team possesses the ball at least once, even if the first team scores a touchdown. And Philly wants to do that.
I like that.
You like that?
I do.
Cosign.
Yeah, I mean,
I thought that for a while.
I think the Bucs would have liked that rule last year because the Atlanta and Kansas City games went to overtime and they never touched the ball in overtime. So I'd be willing to bet we vote yes on this one.
I've always even been the proponent of, I wish we even did the college rules for overtime.
I love those.
I love that.
Yeah,
so I'm like, at least this is better, you know? But yeah, I think the sudden death thing, I mean, you can always make the argument again of like defense has got to step up, but it's rough when you don't even get the chance, and it's based on a coin flip. It's that's what I think is so sad, is it's the fact that the coin flip is so vital and important, and you have no control over that.
And how many times have we seen that play out between the Chiefs and the Bills? I'm sure Josh Allen is a big proponent.
I imagine he's the one that submitted this.
But it's just like every single time, it's like just if they had an opportunity, probably would have gone.
So those are probably some of the top ones. What else do we have?
They want to expand, what they call the sky judge, where they see something upstairs and they just really quickly get it down to the officials and they get the call right. They want to expand the number of plays and occurrences that this can apply to, which I think is probably good.
Especially the sky judge is quicker than like a full review.
It's been working well.
And so therefore it's like we all want the calls to be right, and we all want the game to not be delayed more than it has to be. So that feels like a two birds, one stone.
I mean, I think like we've seen that it works. So just letting it work on more things is probably a good thing. You get it right if you can get it right quickly, right?
For sure. All right, what's next?
This one I really actually like. Detroit wants to remove the automatic first down part of the penalty for defensive holding and illegal contact. I have always felt that this was an overly punitive penalty. And it just, I mean, I like to think of this in the eyesight of a fan. Like when you're watching the game, are there many more irritating occurrences that happen in the game than when your defense is on the field? It's 3rd and 12. They throw the ball over to the right. It's incomplete, but there's a flag on the other side because of defensive holding. and it's an automatic first down.
Yeah.
That seems
It's just too much. Now, there's been a lot of pushback since this was announced that there will be, as they keep saying, unintended consequences.
Yeah, people holding on 3rd and 12.
Coaches teaching them to do so. I still think it's worth it. I don't think it would make that big of a difference, but I could be wrong. I don't actually expect this to pass, though.
Interesting. I'm kind of with you. I think I like it. All right, and then the next one, of course, is the one the Eagles care the most about.
Well, it wasn't them. It was Green Bay that made this proposal to ban the tush-push play. I don't really have a strong feeling on this. Do you guys?
Yeah. Well, I liked what Todd Bowles said about it at the combine. Was kind of like, well, until we find a way to stop it, they're going to keep having success with it. So why don't you just find a way to stop it instead of banning it?
And the Bucs actually have stopped it a few times.
You know what it's called? Having Vita Vea. That's our counter to that rule change, is having Vita Vea. So I think that's why we're like, it's fine, and other teams are like, no, because they don't have a Vita Vea.
It's just really specific.
Right.
Yeah.
And they don't even want to ban pushing by a teammate. You just can't push like immediately after the snap, and I don't know.
Yeah, I would like to also ban the flying over it like we saw in the Super Bowl. that got ridiculous. All right, so next, what do we have? Got a couple more.
Yeah, this is a big one. This comes up every few years whenever there's a team that finishes with a record that's noticeably better than the division winner, but they're a wild card and they have to go on the road. That's never bothered me personally, but Detroit, I think, suggested the seeding is only based on your record. So last year Minnesota would have been seeded higher than the Rams, and the Rams would have had to go to Minnesota. To me, I guess I don't view myself as old school about a lot of things, but I think I am on this one. I mean, most sports, and ours in particular, have divisions, and they always have, and they've meant something. And if you win your division, you get a reward. Yeah. That's just always the way it's been. So I don't know. I think you should still. I know that every now and then there's a division that all 4 teams are kind of down, and like when we played, we had to go on the road to face Washington in the Super Bowl run. They had a 7-9 record, I think, but won the division. It's going to happen from time to time, but you don't have to overhaul the system that the sport has been forever. Just because that happens every now and then. It doesn't. To me, it's not a change that needs to be made.
Yeah, divisions change every year in terms of how competitive or not they are, and all of it. I think it's probably responding to one year that felt unfair, but overall the parity does change enough within divisions that I don't think you have to do that.
Yep.
I agree.
And then one more, there's rule changes and there's bylaw changes and resolutions. I don't remember which one this is.
They sound thrilling.
It's just I didn't include all of them, but this one I thought was kind of interesting. You know how they have the negotiation period for 52 hours, or what a lot of people call legal tampering, before the start of free agency. During that time, teams are allowed to contact representative players, but not the players themselves unless there's a player like Laramie Tunsil who is his own own agent. This makes sense to me. They want to allow, during that time, you can make one Zoom call with the player himself.
All right.
I don't see a problem with that. Whatever.
Sounds
We're
like
already
just a
negotiating.
tiny bit of tampering.
Right.
So just the miniature tampering. That's so funny. I like it. All right. Well, those are the potential rule changes. So we will be at owners' meetings next week as well to see. So when we do our show next week, we'll be able to update you on what did and did not pass and how we feel about it.
Yeah,
I hope they listen to our analysis to make their votes.
Will. Some of them will be just tabled. They won't necessarily be decided yet.
Yeah. All right. So our answer to the trivia. What do we have?
I guess that's my part.
I guess that's your part.
So did you come up with anything?
I started trying to, and I went through a lot of draft picks in my head while you were talking, and then I realized I also needed to be able to respond to you, and so I quit, and I didn't get to the answer.
I'd be willing to bet.
I ruled out a lot of people, but I didn't get to the answer.
I'd be willing to bet that there's some people out there who are thinking they have it for sure, and it's Jameis Winston.
That was my first thought, but then I was like, nope.
No, he won. They won the championship in his freshman year.
Yep.
And then we drafted him after his second season. So it wasn't Jameis Winston. It was actually Mark Barron, the safety out of Alabama that we took in 2012 with the 7th overall pick. And him and Alabama had just won the national championship a few months prior.
I like it. That's great. That's a good answer. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us on this edition of Bucs Insider. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you next time.